Cool. I see Westbrook join. Can you hear us okay?
That seemed to work.
Awesome. Yeah, sorry for that, everyone. It totally just did not work as expected, even though we scheduled it. But awesome. Super excited to invite everybody to this first lit space. We have some cool topics and an awesome guest, Westbrook from Adobe. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Westbrook Johnson, and I am a web components aficionado, a lover, a developer, and sometimes a hair puller outer. I work with Adobe, where I lead the Spectrum Web Components project, but I am also a part of a couple really cool projects, both the OpenWC and Modern Web, who are a really great group of open source projects and developers, as well as the Web Components Community Group, which is a newer initiative to bring together Web Components developers across all of the frameworks and base classes, so that we can have a bigger voice in the broader JavaScript community.
Oh, that's really cool. So how did you start with the working group? Yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, it's important, or I think it's kind of important. I think the W3C maybe thinks it's a little more important to differentiate between working group and community group. But I don't actually know the full difference, other than we
Hmm.
don't write specs. Uh, but the community group got started just before the end of last year, a bit of a response to a really thoughtful blog post that went around the promise of web components by Leah Varro, and
Hmm.
it started a really great conversation about, are we as a community really coming together to tell the story and of the benefits and the tribulations and the possibilities of web components in a way that sort of aligns with the bright future that was maybe sold to the community, over the last 8 or 10 years, depending on how long you've had your ear to the ground on web components.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, I know it's been a cool group to kind of be a part of and kind of help with all of that. So how did you discover Lit? What's like kind of your history with using Lit and what you use it for and what you like about it?
Yeah, so I've actually used Lit for a while now. I got started with web components early on in the Polymer project days, right before 1.0 actually, and so I've been following it for a good long time. I started working in applications, and at the time when Lit first came out, I was working on a video chat application, and it, sort of pairing it with things like Firebase and some of the sort of last vestiges of the Polymer library. I found really great success, and it's been really cool seeing the ease with which doing things like that has increased as the community has really expanded, and the sort of tooling foundation to, both develop as well as test as well as release and maintain has expanded.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've liked Lit because of just like how small it is and it makes it really easy to, kind of build these like reusable blocks. And I didn't use Polymer. I actually joined right when Lit was a thing.
Oh yeah, were you working with web components before, or?
Nope, I actually joined right as web components were actually officially supported on all browsers. So
Oh, you're like a sweet summer child there, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's
uh,
a yeah.
Maybe we should do a little bit of introduction for Rene.
Cool. Yeah, so my name is Rody. I am a developer advocate for material design.
And then I'm Elliot. I am a software. Sorry. Sorry, we're in the same room. We're finally working from the office. Maybe we can figure that out in a bit. But yeah, I'm Elliot. I'm a software engineer on the, I was about to say Polymer team, on the Lit team and material design as well. And yeah.
Cool. And could you introduce yourself one more time, Westbrook, for anybody that just joined?
Yeah, I'm Westbrook, and I am a lead developer on the Spectrum Web Components project at Adobe.
Awesome. Very cool. So another thing we could talk about is um, maybe ways that you were kind of utilizing some of Lit's maybe most recent features, and that can kind of be up to you. But just curious, yeah, what you're using right now that maybe people might be interested in.
Yeah, that's a really exciting question because there are so many um, new features coming to Lit 2.0. However, it's also a little bit of a like I'm about to get there question in that uh, Spectrum Web Components supports a lot of as yet to be released, but
Yeah.
rather large projects. And at their size, it's a little difficult to move to the RC that Lit is on.
Mm,
But we're starting to look at a number of the patterns, um, even in like sort of bridge implementations. One of which is the context sort of resolution via the directives,
mm.
and really hanging that off of elements via uh, the name just jumped out of my brain via the controller API. That's
Oh yeah, the reactive controller.
the reactive the reactive controller API, which makes it really easy to both situate a context in your tree, but also um, educate your component how to resolve its context
Yeah.
throughout the tree.
Yeah. Speaking of, do you prefer writing TypeScript with this, or you use JavaScript? And if you do use TypeScript, do you like using the decorators?
So I do use TypeScript, and it makes it really cool to use the decorators because I think that that sort of approach is really smooth, and I really hope that the relatively sunshiny news I've heard from the ECMAScript body about decorators maybe gets that into the main body soon. But
Fingers
I
crossed.
Yeah.
fingers crossed. Like I don't know if I had like 10 more fingers, I'd cross them 5 more times.
Oh
But
yes, for sure.
uh,
Oh,
because
and
it's
mind
interesting.
circling back just a little bit with reactive controllers. It's I feel like it's one of the Lit 2. And I was wondering, like, is there any cool use case that you've actually been using them for in either at work or personal projects or anything of the sort?
Yeah, so I've used them for a couple in like research via personal projects for what will be hopefully actual features at Adobe in the future. One place where I really like it is I've used it to build my own slide deck
Mm.
and
Hey,
pair it with some animation libraries to be able to make the slides animate really beautifully with physics, not just with CSS animations.
Oh,
And
that's
so that's been
interesting
really
approach.
cool.
yeah, it's pretty cool. I was talking to one of our material web engineers and Liz, if anybody knows her, and she was actually doing this really cool thing on how to like automate accessibility per role by making like a controller for like combo box or controller for like button and stuff like that. I just think I don't know. I really think it's a cool idea, like controllers to like declaratively add all these features and bundle them up. So really excited to see where that goes and
Yeah,
where the rest of the community takes it.
I think that's really cool. At Adobe, our one of our not lit client side projects has done a lot of work with modularizing things like accessibility features for use across multiple contexts like that. And we're really excited for once we were able to get to Lit 2.0 so that we could start looking at using that similar modularization strategy for both for um, accessibility features, but also some of the shared state contexts that come up really often in a component library like Spectrum Web Components, but also like in the application context that we're leveraging Spectrum Web Components.
Yeah, speaking of theming, do you have a preferred method for styling your web components?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I have some preferred opinions that I might use if I were to be developing from a project from scratch. And I would love to be able to get this into Spectrum Web Components a little more often, things like CSS parts and the like. But we're actually at a really interesting location in the Spectrum. Spectrum is Adobe's design system. The Spectrum ecosystem, wherein there is another UI client-side JavaScript UI framework that outputs Spectrum components, and both of our projects consume a pre-existing CSS library that outlines um, the uh, the Spectrum design system for web, if you will, and that system is structured all around CSS custom properties, and it actually uses a really great sort of central set of tokens to be able to populate the entire component ecosystem with whether you're talking about dark versus light themes, or you're talking about um, large versus small scales, or also we do a lot of work to ensure that we support right to left as well as left to right text, and the CSS custom property system that they've set up is the basis for that in our application.
Mm, that's pretty cool.
Talking about styling, have you had any interesting applications for different types of, like, you're using CSS custom properties as like the basis. I was wondering if you have like any interesting use cases about for like shadow roots. I mean, not shadow roots. For what is it called? Part, like colon part for selecting certain things, or are y'all mostly staying away from that, or is that for like one-offs?
Yeah, so the broader system, as I said, is structured before it becomes part of our project. So including parts in the system is not something that it would involve us deviating from the larger Spectrum community at Adobe.
Hmm.
But one place where we have just brought parts into the library, I feel like you're like watching my GitHub PRs. Uh, is we have a theming system, so that allows us to switch on as that sort of core set of CSS custom properties, and so it's an element that takes the scale and the color stops and the text direction, and then decides what CSS custom properties
Mm.
should be available to the page at that time.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so it works really well. Like if you're in an app and you're not trying to do anything like defeat CSS layering or CSS clip border clipping, uh, but almost every application we have has some sort of overlays, and every overlay has to escape those things to be displayed correctly. And so we're throwing that part of the DOM to the end of the body to ensure that we're getting our Z indexing and whatnot correct when that happens. But when we do that, we're actually throwing the content outside of our theme root. And so we kind of resolve the theme context before we throw the content. And then we throw the content. And when the content gets to its new location, it wraps itself in a new um, theme scope. But some of our users had found that if they were creating their own CSS custom properties to hang off of the initial theme that the main application was in, those custom properties were not following the thrown content to the end of the body.
Yeah.
And so we realized that this is actually the perfect place for part, because you could assign a theme part to this theme provider that we're creating in the overlay context, and be able to just use overlay ::part theme and app: ::part theme and any of your custom CSS custom properties. There's probably a better way to say that. Then apply to both places, whether it's your main application or this thrown content. And it's looking like a really nice way to be able to build the app-specific customizations inside of the Spectrum-specific application that we're helping ship.
I do remember when part was under development that there was a pair to it, : theme, and essentially that was essentially a shadow part that would cascade through shadow roots, similar to custom properties and how they do that. I was wondering, from what I remember, its current state is nobody's really working on it right now, but they haven't really shut the door on it. I was wondering, do you think that could fit anywhere inside your current setup or something of the sort?
Whether it fit inside of my setup or not, I think is a little unclear. But if that were something that were to start to land, I would definitely want to find a way to do so, because I think there's this really interesting combination when you get in that I've found when you get into component libraries and pattern ecosystems, where you want to be able to use pieces over and over again, but you don't always want them to be components. They don't always need to be components. And because of and right now that's like our easiest way to create a movable piece of UI. But if we were able to have that theme that pierced through the whole Shadow DOM stack and pointed to these specific parts all throughout your ecosystem, you could have these smaller DOM snippets that had visual mobility and equality without having to always lean on a full custom element to do so. And I think that that touches a little bit on something that we're going to be looking at in the next couple of months with the Web Components community group, and that's that the one sort of responsibility for the W3C of a community group is to publish reports on the community. And we want to bring together a list of pain points and a list of sort of orphan specs and a list of maybe future requests as a broader Web Components community, not necessarily just Lit, but there's definitely a lot of Lit voices in the conversation, and present that sort of unified front to the working group and the actual browser and vendors, so that we can maybe, whether it's theme and starting the conversation again about that, or it's a new specification that gives similar or better, maybe even capabilities around theming. So definitely check out the community group. We have a Slack channel, and join the conversation if you are also a fan of theming.
Do you have a good way for people to join that, like a super short link or
how does this sort of radio setting is very interesting. And so I will share something out as soon as.
Yeah, we can always pin a tweet or send something out later.
Yeah, like a follow up. This is a brand new realm for me. My first space, by the way. Thanks for having me and allowing me to learn this.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Yeah, I mean, I guess the show notes are just our Twitter thread. So. Yeah. Like we said, we're definitely going to put everything on Slack and everywhere else. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Any final things you want to say about Lit?
So it was interesting, like thinking about being a part of this conversation today. I was running into a problem in one of my components, and I was like, oh man, I'm going to have a bunch of negative energy going into this conversation. And then I realized one of my favorite things of Web Components in general, but also very specifically to Lit, and that's that there's very little magic. And I dug in and what I had been using as a decorator, I just rewrote quickly as a getter setter pair, and I was able to track the origin of like a property being double set that I couldn't figure the source of. And it was just really great when I was like, stop just like clicking around and like console logging around and realize I have full control over the context that I'm writing in. There's no black box. There's no compile to function calls. There's no magic really, and it made me realize that even when I'm having hard days, you can get right to the source really quick, and that feels really good.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
really great to hear. Sorry, Rudy.
No,
But like, I feel like that's one of the difficult tight ropes that we have to walk, where it's like provide enough developer tooling, but make sure you don't like lose the note. Like yeah, you want to make sure that people still know exactly what this is doing. And but then again, we don't want people writing just DOM calls everywhere, right? um, but it's really good that you picked up on that and enjoyed that. Not that lit can't have magic. We do make sure that we write things in such a way that you can change the renderer to React if you really wanted to, and use React development under the hood and stuff like that, and write your JSX if that's what you want, um, or just use lit HTML in and of itself. So it's pretty good.
I guess one thing I wanted to ask you is, what is your favorite component you've come across that you feel like is just fun to use and work with, whether one you built or one you found in the community?
Wow, that's a great question.
Name your favorite child right now.
Sam, it's definitely Sam. So it's hard to say one component unless you're thinking like an application component for me. But uh, one, I think, component family, maybe if that helps, that I think really
Sure.
does a great job of both of proving the benefits of web components. And I apologize, it's not a lit project, but it's as close to lit as you can get because it is just vanilla web components, and that's the generic components by one of my fellow OpenWC members, uh, Pascal Ship.
Oh
And
yeah, gotta love OpenWC and Pascal.
yeah, but his generic components project works to just have as the simplest implementation of some of the sort of gnarly accessibility patterns that we come up on the web as web components with just really simple paths to customizing their visual delivery. And they're all vanilla and they're all super small. And we recently attempted to challenge Twitter, and I think we're on Twitter, uh, to maybe start a bit of like a style stage or a CSS Zen garden of customized implementations of it. So if you're a big fan of styling and a big fan of really cool components, definitely check those out.
Very cool. Yes, and it's all about finding web components wherever they are and whatever they're built with, because that's one cool thing about this ecosystem is once you create it, you can just share it with other people, and just integrate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us, Westbrook, and also Elliot, and everyone that joined in to our first Twitter space. Sorry for all the troubleshooting at the beginning, but yeah, sometimes things don't work as expected. But yeah, please feel free to reach out to us and let us know what you thought if you have any questions. And of course, if you ever want to hear more about Lit, definitely reach out. Thanks again, Westbrook, and hope to see you on the web.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, bye.